Can you hear the sound of their shadowy wings? Will you follow? Crows are powerful creatures, messengers between worlds. They carry wisdom, secrets, enchantments. The Crow's Key podcast opens the door to ideas and insights from esoteric authors, herbalists, astrologers, artists, and all kinds of magical people. Join us for conversations and speculations about this wondrous and mysterious universe. Welcome to the Crow's Key. Hello and welcome to the Crow's Key podcast. Today I am delighted to welcome Nat Tarnawski to chat with us about all things plants. Welcome, Nat. Would you like to introduce yourself and chat a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me. My name's Nat Tarnawski. My name is Natalie, but my family name is Natalka. My family is second generation Canadian. I moved around a lot as a child. We're primarily from the West Coast, but I was born on the Atlantic coast. I am a folk herbalist. So to me, that means that I've learned through traditions and lineage passed down. It's something that's like a self-knowing. So like I'm very self-taught. I have a lot of different mentors in my life, but I essentially have learned through plants and through my own studies and through family lineage how to be a herbalist. I'm from Goderich, Ontario now, but like I said, I'm kind of from all over.
Wow, what a wonderful breadth of experience to bring to your herbal practice. I think you kind of started to answer what my next question was going to be, which is what drew you to herbalism initially?
What drew me to herbalism is, I think that like most herbalists, our origin story is rooted in healing. So for me, it was, I had found myself at a place where I was very unwell and I had exhausted myself in kind of Western medicalism. I had found that my mental health was really bad and I had kind of exhausted myself in Western pharmaceuticals and clinical like therapy. And as soon as I started getting into nature and being outside is when I started kind of healing that part of myself. I got into it because of a need to heal. And then once I started, I learned a lot about myself and I learned a lot about the power of just being in nature and what that can do for everyone. It's like there was fragments of myself, like you have all different aspects of yourself. You have your physical body, your spiritual body, your mental body, and your energetic body. And I was in a big disalignment of that. And I found that as soon as I started being attuned to nature and the herbal path is when that started to converge again. And it's an ever ongoing process. I don't believe that you can take one herb just like you can't take one pharmaceutical and then be a healed person. But it definitely was an immediate spark was ignited. And there was like a sacred remembering that happened. And it was just like a part of myself that had been missing. And once that started, it kind of put me on my path to wanting to make that a part of my life forever.
That answer really resonates with me too, because as a fellow walker of the green path, I was also drawn to herbalism through personal healing and as a way to reconnect with things around me that through disconnection had led to deep unwellness. So I feel like this is something that a lot of people who work with plants have probably experienced is that feeling of almost coming home when you start to work with the green world, when you start to work with the plants, when you become familiar again with the nature that maybe you were cut off from. So that's such a beautiful part, I think, of this type of work.
Yeah, I see it even with like my kids and the children that I work with. I see like an instant change in their, not just physical being, but their energetic being. For example, my 6-year-old son displays a lot of ADHD traits, and it's hard for him to fit into more clinical world like school, for example, and sitting in a bright lit room and having a lot of like still practice. Mm-hmm. And he's vibrating on this completely different level. But as soon as he's out in nature where there's not a lot of rules of like, no, don't do that, or sit here, or be quiet, or whatever it is, right? He just flourishes. He's like attuned and grounded immediately. He can focus and a hyper focus in a completely different way than most people. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing to see how even these little tiny beings can have nature has such a profound effect on them.
That's so lovely. Yeah, it meets us where we're at, I think, and it helps us to feel that who we are is never wrong. It's never broken. It's just part of this whole wonderful system. So the next question that I had for you today, and as somebody who is on social media and has probably seen a lot of posts about herbalism and encountered perhaps some misconceptions about herbalism, are there any that you would like to address?
The primary one is that herbs are powerful. Mm-hmm. Herbs do carry very potent medicinal constituents, and you can make yourself very sick on them. But relatively speaking, herbs are safe, are of nature, as are we. And there is a little bit of a gatekeeping system that I've seen in natural medicine. And one of the ones is that it's like an unsafe practice, and you have to only follow the instructions of some like master herbalist who has taken a course. And what I'm passionate about is bringing herbalism into every home. Mm-hmm. That's something that I think is important and something that we've lost along the way. I think that there is, like I said, a lot of gatekeeping and wisdom keeping around herbalism when it's something that is innate within us. And it's something that we have very purposely been disconnected from over centuries. And I think there's a reawakening that's happening and a remembering that's happening. I would love a world where there's a herbalist in every home, where there's one on every block and every street. Our emergency rooms are very bogged down because of dis-ease within people. And I think it's because we're getting further and further away from living close to the land and from the knowledge that's been erased and kept away from the people. So for me, a misconception would be that it's dangerous and it's only something that very established practitioners can give you that knowledge, and you have to pay them for it. Mm-hmm. I love the idea of being able to make a living off of herbalism because it's my passion. But what my soul says is that it's knowledge that should be shared. The fear should be driven out of it. A lot of it is just our food. Like a lot of safe, healthy herbs are just food that should be in your regular diet. I would love to be able to have a platform where I can openly share as much as I can. That's why a lot of my material is just me being at home in my life, but there's also videos that I like to share online just about common herbs that are outside, or if I go live, I'm teaching people who I'm foraging, or, different times of the year, what they look like, to help people have that information.
I think that is a really wonderful, empowering approach. And it is somewhat troubling to see some of the fear mongering that happens around herbs. Of course, there are plants with very potent constituents that maybe shouldn't be used without knowing what you're doing.
Absolutely.
But for the most part,
100% agree, especially like poisons. Anything that can poison you is usually a very, very potent medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And you're definitely going to need a skilled practitioner. But for things like lemon balm and yarrow and chamomile and sage and all of the herbs that we've worked so closely with through all the years, you know, I get a lot of people asking me to help identify plants because there's a lot of fear of, poisoning yourself or your family.
Mm-hmm.
I think that getting that information out is really a passion project of mine. I did a really cool thing with Janneke Vorschveld from Seeds Rooted in Youth. And this was right after I had been really ill. I had a bad relapse with my mental health, and it was the first thing that I did that felt like I was coming back to life again. Mm-hmm. And it was like 190 ECE workers, and we took them out into the bush. And
wow.
The idea was we want to start getting our youth out into nature to mm-hmm. connect and to remember and to have respect and reverence and build that's building block going forward for the rest of their lives. And we find that like a lot of the ECE workers never take their children out, even though we have really beautiful, safe trails. They don't take them out because there is a danger in that, right? They're afraid a child could ingest a plant. They're afraid they could touch something, become reactive. And I think that fear goes away with competency. So as soon as you start Absolutely. To build that competency, then there's not as much fear. Like my son is 6 and you take him out and you point at anything at any stage right now. And he can identify right now goldenrod, everybody from their in their fall stage, in their seed stage, because it's just been something he's been introduced to since he was young. But yeah, I think that moment was a really beautiful moment of teaching all of these early childhood educators on the natural realm and seeing them have this childlike wonder, seeing them get like so excited about what it is. I want to touch it. I want to see it. And it just grows here and you can harvest it. And like, what do you do with it then? So that's something that I'm really passionate about because I feel like that really drives home. It changes the course of what can be just from that simple act of taking childhood educators. You can change like so many different children's lives.
Absolutely. Wow. I'm just seeing in my mind right now, like, it's like you scattered all of these seeds and all of these wonderful relationships with plants are going to grow from that, which is incredible because once you, as you said, once you have that competency, once you remove that fear, that makes space to form a relationship. And that's going to be a relationship that could benefit these kids for the rest of their lives, which is really wonderful. And that leads into actually the next question I had for you today, which is how does your relationship with the land and with the green world impact your life?
I honestly believe that it is one of the things that saved my life. Mm-hmm. I think through the way that I learned herbalism was maybe I wanted to start from the seed stage, even before that, like conception. So I slowly gathered kind of 10 plants that were medicinal that I really wanted to harbor a relationship with. This was probably back in 2013. Yeah. And then I grew them inside in like late February, early March. And then I like slowly learned everything about them that I could. And I started them from baby seedlings and then brought them outside and inside and outside and inside and watched them grow and then harvested them, ingested them in different ways and learned as much as I could about this handful of plants. And through that process, I had a very, very kind of critical change in my life. I'd been healthier than I'd ever been in my entire life. I felt like I was being cared for and held just by doing the same. There was this like reciprocity that was happening between the plants and I. And I think it changed the course of my life for sure. I don't know if I would have been a very changed person after that dark winter period if I had not stepped on my herbal path that way. And it's beautiful, the symbolism, being able to like feel cared and nurtured and come back to life and regenerate myself within while doing that on the landscape too. This land that I was really sacred to me, or is really sacred to me. I don't live on it anymore, but it was a beautiful thing to start with this very barren land. It was a high predator area. There was no biodiversity. The soil was very clay and sand. I watched this land mirror what was happening to me inside. It just became completely lush and just overtaken by greenery. And there was falcons that moved in, and there was rabbits and squirrels and fox and deer in the backyard. Like just an incredible biodiversity bloomed out of that in a very short period of time. And it mirrored exactly what was happening within my inner landscape and at the same time.
Thank you for sharing that. That is such a beautiful piece of magic, to see that happening in the environment around you and know that it was your care and attention that precipitated all of that. That's so wonderful. So I wanted to chat a little bit about the wildcrafting. You do lead some wildcrafting walks, one of which I was privileged to come along on, and it was fantastic. I still look back at that day and it was such a wonderful experience. As a wild crafter, do you have any advice for how to ethically collect wild plants?
Yes. Okay, so there's a lot, like even if we're looking at the spiritual community, there's a lot of different cultures that have different ways of showing respect and reverence for the plant world. For me as an animist, it makes it very easy to be able to ethically harvest. But for starters, I know that there's a lot of cultures that will give a sacred plant in place of harvesting a sacred plant. And that's never been something that resonates with me. I do hold all of my plant allies very near and dear to me. They feel like family, but me giving a part of another plant's spirit or body hasn't felt like an equal exchange. So I kind of stopped doing the exchange because it just didn't feel like it resonated with me as a wild crafter. What I try and do is, because I know the landscape really well, and I teach the landscape to people to be able to form that relationship, help bridge that gap with people. I teach really invasive plants and how to harvest them primarily, and substitutes. So if we were to look at the ramps or wild leeks or wild garlic, they take a really long time to propagate. The seeds take a really long time to germinate. Bulb division happens fairly quickly, but an area can get wiped out completely very easily by unethical harvesting. So what I'll go in and teach is instead of harvesting, even if people say go in and take one of the 2 leaves from a ramp and leave the bulb, I'll just teach, go and grab immense amounts of garlic mustard, which is highly invasive. And these are ways that you can turn it into horseradish with the root, or ferment the root, or pickle the root, or just use the green tops as a pesto or salads. I try to find ways that I know through years of study that'll best help our natural landscape, and then teach that as a standard for people going in. I'll teach via the United Plant Savers endangered species list I'll make sure that I always teach ways to keep that environment safe and to keep those plants living, and the best way to create like a good, healthy ecosystem. You know, I always teach not over harvesting practices. There's a couple of like ceremonious things that I do like to do. Like the children and I always make this symbolic ornamental jewelry, which is like an amulet. Take the years before and we'll go and plant them to be able to repropagate that plant species.
All of that makes a lot of sense to me. The sort of, again, it's about that reciprocity. It's about living in relationship with the plants and helping the environment that they're in, as well as helping them to propagate. Both of those sound like really wonderful ways to give back while you are harvesting what you need. I'm just going to make a note to include the United Plant Savers list of endangered plants in my show notes. So if anybody is interested in looking that up, you will be able to find that.
I just encourage everybody too to like go into their heart space and take breaths while they're in the forest. And usually you're able to suss out what feels right to you.
Yes.
I was actually saying this to my partner earlier. I was talking about different books and different herbal practitioners and how it kind of feels similar to me, like different scripture that's been written over time. For example, like the Bible, where to me, it's always felt like somebody else's experience just written down. Whereas to somebody else, it's like fully the word of God, and they follow it, right? You have to sit with it and see how it feels with you. So some other cultural practice might do one thing, or, text on Google might have told you to do it this way. But all of craft, any craft, is like sitting and feeling within all of your bodies, like what is true to me and what is true to my connection. So what works for me is something that's more tangible and easy to see the results and then feel that within myself, because that's how my body works. And but for somebody else, it might be something else. There might be something that's like calling to them, and it could come to them in like a snapshot of a vision or a memory that plays. Because I've studied lots of different techniques of plant communication. And for a lot of people, which is interesting, the way that a plant will communicate is via playing a memory. So you'll have like a snap of something that comes to you, and it can be a memory of something, and that holds like significance or symbolism in it.
Thank you for adding that about communicating, because I do think that is such an important part of working with plants is, yes, going into that stillness and letting the plant guide you. And that was something that for me was a little bit of a learning curve, because I think the ego tries to get in the way sometimes. And it can be helpful to just remember that in that stillness is where I think the most clear directions can come through, but it does take practice.
Yeah.
So do you have any plant stories that you would like to share?
I was going over this with my girlfriend right before I logged in. I was like, what are some of my good stories? Like, I have lots of I've helped, or plants have helped, and I've been like the conduit for many people. And I'm trying to think of one that stands out. But I think what I want to share is I kind of touched on this in the last one, and it's just coming up to me strong, so I'm going to share it. I come from a family that's Ukrainian, from like the region between Romania and Ukraine and the Bukovinian region. And I come from a line of very poor farmers. And during the Holodomor is when my family came over to Alberta. They were starved out by communism, and they partook in a lot of wild foraging to be able to sustain life. So I think that's where I get a lot of it's in my blood and my bones that way. But I remember there was like a few kind of like witchy things that my babshka did. Like there was always little dishes sitting out of like onions with salt, and like, you know, if we got a cut, she would thin slice garlic and put it on your finger and wrap it up, and that would be your polysporin. Just everything was in a plaster. She made poultice all the time. Mm-hmm. And I remember there was like I had a Vyshyvanka, like I still have one from when I used to do hopka dancing, Ukrainian dancing when I was younger. And in my Vyshyvanka, there's this beautiful draping of all of these red beads that are very symbolic in Ukrainian culture. It started as like kind of a presentation of maidenhood. It's very representative of the blood we bleed in our menstrual cycle, but also the blood that we carry through our veins and family history and lineage. It's a protective amulet, and it's adoration for self-love. So I really wanted to take the aspects of my cultural history, which dabbled a lot in wheat weaving and an ode to the harvest and to connection to land, and pass those down to my daughter, Maddie. And so we started every full moon in late October or early November. There's this really beautiful plant intelligence that happens with rose hips and hawthorn berries when the frost hits. It becomes sweeter, more nutritious, and it's a perfect ripe ovary for all of the seeds to be able to germinate in the spring. And it's very, very beautiful and symbolic. So we go out and we will play some folk songs and sing some folk songs. And we harvest rosehip as the sun goes down and into the night. And we have little headlamps. And we take our harvest home, and then we light a beeswax candle and sing our songs and sing our prayers into beading on this wax thread. And it's a great way to preserve all that rosehip to be able to use in soups and stews and jellies, anything like that you want to make. But it also we create this beautiful Namesto jewelry using the natural beads, and then we'll take it back in early spring after thaw, and we'll plant it out in the bush with prayers for new life and new regeneration. And yeah, I kind of lost sight of the question now, I think.
Oh, no, that was perfect. I'm just sitting here, like, just feeling the beauty of that. I've got like the good kind of chills. That's such a wonderful ritual that you share with your daughter. So thank you.
We passed it on to some other friends too. And this is the first year that, my stepdaughters have been involved too. So it's like, it's very beautiful to be able to share something that I know will be like a memory or a tradition, and they feel it. Mm-hmm. To be in that moment with them when they're feeling it, and how beautiful and big that is.
Absolutely. And rose is such a nurturing, mothering kind of plant too. So
yeah, and it's in perfect duality, because it does have a very perfect balance to it. It's this like very sacred ripe ovary and womb sitting there. So that is obviously the mother. It's very Venusian and very moon-like. And then you have that beautiful, strong stem. And then it's got the thackles or the prickles. A lot of people call them thorns. Hawthorn comes from a thorn. It grows out of the heartwood, whereas rose has a prickle, which you can push off of the side of it, but it's very like Martian and protective, and strong and resilient and sharp. It's beautiful. So it's got this like really wonderful duality to it. It's almost whole. It's just, yeah.
If you can't tell already, it's one of my favorites.
I can tell. It's beautiful.
So before we finish our conversation today, I was wondering if you have any words of guidance for somebody who might just be starting out and is interested in herbalism. Where do you start? What's a good starting point? I know you touched on that a little bit in your own story, but did you have anything else that you might share?
Yeah. I think when things really changed for me, because I've found a couple, I feel like when I started my journey, it was harder to find herbalists online than it is today. Today, I feel like it's becoming more prolific. The information is getting out there. There's a lot more herbalists to be able to look for. And I feel like people like you have lots of like good starting books. I feel like when things really changed for me on my herbal path, it was like finding the right mentors, herbalists that jive with you. It's always like there's a lot of incredible information online on YouTube that you can find, because not every community has an established herbalist. And if they do, it's usually like they're off grid and and like hiding out in their log cabin in the woods or something. So,
which sounds lovely, but
a herbalist that resonates with you. I could list like a few wonderful. I love Paul Bergner's work and Matthew Wood and Michael Tierra. A good starting point would be like Rosemary Gladstar. There's just so many wonderful. Richo Cech is really great too. But yeah, finding a herbalist and buying their literature and reading. And then the number one teacher is just getting out in nature. Buy a foraging book, go out, start learning the names that were given to them, watching them grow through the different seasons, seeing who eats them and what they do for the area, where they like to grow, how the sun hits them, you know. All of those are great indicators. Rudolf Steiner was an 1800s theologist who like came up with the doctrine of signatures, which is essentially how the plant can display itself to you through senses, through like seeing its shape and the colors that it produces when it's in flower, or the color of the latex it bleeds through the root, or are all indicators of something within us. Like an example would be like mullein, Verbascum thapus, is got this beautiful fuzzy layer on it, right? And it has quite a yellow flower in its second year. But all of the mucosa lining of our upper respiratory system is fuzzy like that plant. So that's a beautiful indicator that that plant has an affinity to the upper respiratory system. Or like mugwort, raspberry leaf, those plants that have an underlining silver, that's a doctrine of signatures to let you know that it is mirroring like the light of the womb, or the moon, which is the womb, right? So all of those herbs have an affinity to primarily the female reproductive system. So learning little cues that nature gives you and the hidden symbolism behind it, or the deeper meaning behind it, is usually like a really great tool to be able to start or learn from. Just observing, listening, watching it all through the different seasons is the number one starting point. I'd say to anybody, just put your hands in the soil, go out and get dirty.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's great advice. And after we finish today, I might grab some of those names from you so I can include them if people would like to look them up. So do you have any projects that you would like to tell people about before we sign off today?
Yeah, actually, this one is very exciting, but I have been trying to find a way to be able to, I like to make herbs available to people. So anytime people reach out, I will make either like, a dried leaf or a salve or a tincture or an elixir for them. And I do carry some in town at the den in Goderich, just so people can go out and find the herbs that way. But what I really want is to be able to start putting all of my knowledge out there for people to be able to ingest at whatever time they want and be able to go back to as a resource. So I want to start a channel of a beginner's herbalism and foraging through our different seasons and how to find medicine and make medicine for your family. And I just want it to be the home herbalist program for everybody to be able to use at a very, very, I don't want to turn profit off of it. I just want to get knowledge out there and at people's fingertips.
Wow, that is so exciting. Is this something that people can access now, or is this something that's coming?
No, this is something that's coming. The only avenue I have right now is Instagram. That's my only social anything that I have. So when I start getting that content recorded, I'll have a link that people will be able to go and click to be able to get it. I'm not sure which platform I'm going to be using yet, whether I'm going to be putting it on YouTube or just creating content on a separate video source.
So would you like to share where people can find you and they'll be able to get updates on your exciting project once it's available?
Yeah. So Folk Craft Herbs is my Instagram handle, and that's where you can find me.
Awesome. And we will also link to that too. So you can find all the good stuff in the show notes today. Well, thank you so much for this fantastic conversation today, Nat. This has been wonderful, and I really, really appreciate your time and your sharing and your wisdom. So thank you very much for coming.
Vicki, thanks for having me. This is great.
Thank you for joining us. You can find us on Instagram at The Crow's Key and find our mystical bookstore online at thecrowskey.com.